Hello and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Between the Presets, a podcast by me, Rudy Stettner, that comes out every Monday evening. Here is the place where anything that can be said in polite company is fair game for discussion, even if it occasionally offends. Let's roll. Please be advised that this episode of Between the Presets contains material that may be unsuitable for younger audiences. If that is an issue, please listen at another time or on headphones. Thank you. Good evening. It is the 10th of Tammuz, 5784. On the English calendar, that is the 16th of July, 2024. Just before I sat down to record this podcast, I was eating my dinner and I got several calls from states where I don't know people, so automatically I was suspicious. And I encountered a situation that is all too common. I pick up the phone, I say hello, and there's a long silence. And then it says, "Please stay on the line. Someone will be with you shortly." Now, whenever I hear that, I understand that if I call a doctor's office, if I call the post office, whatever, I expect to be put on hold, sometimes for far longer than I would like. But it used to be that you call somebody and you're a live person on the line. So if you're going to call me, I want to hear your voice within half a second asking for me by name and identifying yourself. When I get a recording and it's garbled and it says, "Please stay on the line for Roger," I don't know any Roger. So as soon as I hear that I'm being dealt with by an automated system, I hang up. It is unacceptable to call me and to put me on hold. So what I do is I use my caller ID, and when I get more than one call from one of these offensive individuals or organizations or whatever, I tag them usually with a very insulting nickname. I might tag that phone number with jackass or idiot, and that way I'm prepared to answer the phone in the appropriate manner. But what I did this time was I called the person back and I said, "You called me and put me on hold. Do not ever call me again." I think part of the problem is that people who run these, I don't know if they call them boiler shops or something, but people who run these telephone banks want to squeeze as much work as they can out of the operators, of the telephone reps. So what they do is they have the system where there's robocalls made and the person only picks up when a live human being is on the line. And I think it probably makes the working conditions very unpleasant for these telephone operators. I went to the Catskills over the week on Sunday for the day, and I passed through a couple of areas with a lot of American flags. I thought that was pretty healthy. I think it's a good idea. It is very good to feel affection for the country you live in, for its civic values, for its history and its tradition. During World War II, Franklin Roosevelt, who was president during that time, gave a speech in which he spoke of the four freedoms. And he defined those as freedom of speech, freedom of worship or freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. It would seem that an essential component of patriotism would be to want these four freedoms: speech, worship, want, and fear, and freedom from want and fear, that one would want them not only for oneself, but for one's fellow citizens. I think it's Voltaire who was quoted as saying, "I disagree with every word you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, or to say them." This, of course, extends to freedom of worship, or freedom of religion, which is slightly different, because worship is, an expression of one's faith, but there might be rituals and commandments that one follows, such as people wearing religious articles that identify them as either Christian or Muslim or Jewish or whatever, practicing dietary laws, what have you. And then, of course, freedom from want, which means freedom from poverty. That means not only hunger, but access to medical care. Freedom from fear, which I think some of the poorest people in our society suffer from the greatest fear, living in high crime areas, people afraid to display their opinions because they might get beat up for them or whatever. We should all want this not only for ourselves, but for other people as well. I know in the last election in 2020, the thought actually crossed my mind that if I had a Trump bumper sticker on my car, or if I had, say, an Israeli flag on my car, that I was inviting vandalism. One of the purposes of having bumper stickers and flags and whatnot is to create a sense of community among adherents of a political belief system, a religion, or an ethnicity. If somebody goes down the street, they're driving to work, and they see, let's say, a Biden bumper sticker, and they happen to be a Biden supporter, or the same with a Trump bumper sticker, it makes people feel like, hey, I'm not the only one out here driving in the morning rush who likes my candidate. And if you got people who will key somebody's car or attack them for wearing say, a T-shirt or a baseball cap from the opposing candidate, you're preventing them from having that sense of community with other supporters of a political candidate or cause. And that is profoundly wrong. It should be punished as when somebody intimidates somebody they disagree with politically. It should be punished as harshly as attacking somebody for their religion or attacking somebody for their race. And when the right to show public support of your candidate is not protected by the force of law, then it could be argued that there is a tacit endorsement of repression of political speech. We have moved very far away from defending freedom of speech. It is really under attack, not only by the government, but by private individuals. There is a general principle that one should be very careful in passing a bad law. Sometimes people feel that if something is wrong, the answer lies not in addressing it through existing laws, but creating new ones. An example might be Holocaust denial, which I think is idiotic, demonstrably false, and is almost always a case of propaganda masquerading as history. I would shun professionally and personally a person who displayed an obsession with this. However, I think that Holocaust denial laws banning that are a slippery, slippery slope. Time has borne me out. We have the proponents of climate change. It used to be global warming, and they say that it's so urgent that we limit our carbon emissions or whatever are polluting to the world, that we got to take all the cars off the road or whatever draconian solution they might recommend. And instead of facilitating a scientific discussion of how to make the human presence on planet Earth less injurious to the ecological balance of the planet, they promote that they suppress the discussion of climate change by accusing people of climate change denial. People who run discussion forums, which, in the case of Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, they really should almost be considered like public utilities. It's a means for people to air their opinions. They suggest banning people who are climate change deniers. Then there are actually attempts to ban people as election deniers. Down in Georgia, they have this case where they accuse Trump supporters of denying the elections, which Hillary Clinton did all the time. Now, it seems to me that the remedy for free speech that you don't like is some more free speech that you do like. One of the nice things about listening to people argue politics or history is each side marshals facts to support their point of view. I am of Croatian ancestry, so when Yugoslavia broke up back in the early 90s, I had a familial bias towards the Croatian point of view. When I spent time outside of my family, I got to know and like Serbs, Bosniaks, Albanians, and I heard each of these very likable groups promoting their historical narrative with a lot of facts, some opinions, and maybe some misconceptions. That's one of the beauties of America, and one of the things I'm most proud about in America is people emigrating from countries where they were shooting their neighbors, persecuting their neighbors, whatever, and they come here and the people that they hated are their next door neighbors, their coworkers, what have you, and they get along with them because they must. It's a beautiful thing. It has, for most of America's history, been a unwritten and sometimes articulated rule: leave your fights at home. If you're Irish or English and you do not like the other side in that conflict, get along. Even if you don't love each other, tolerate each other. The same with Croats and Serbs. The same with Poles and Ukrainians. This is what kept America together over the years and permitted the solidification of a national identity that encompasses people of different races and ethnicities. The last open civil war that the United States had ended in 1865. Spain had a bloody civil war with 500,000 dead from 1936 to 1939. They're still scarred by that experience. They're still digging up dead bodies. Greece had a civil war in 1948, and Yugoslavia had a series of wars in their tumultuous breakup in the early to mid 1990s. I would love it if there could be taught in American high schools and colleges an entire semester, maybe two, detailing civil wars, when neighbor fights against neighbor. If people knew how awful that really is, maybe they would take steps to prevent such societal fractures from occurring on American soil. I remember when, if one used a dirty word in public, one could get a summons. Using profanity in public was considered as more offensive than lighting up a stinky cigar on a bus. X-rated books, X-rated pictures, movies. Back in the old days, those could be confiscated at America's customs. They could shut down stores that sold such materials. Now, of course, what was once banned has become ubiquitous. You almost can't get away from it. It certainly comes in via one's computer, etc., if that is one's choice. And yet we have speech codes on college campuses. We have people going on airplanes with a political slogan on their T-shirt, and they're told that they can't board the plane with it. There is a demonstrable inverse relationship between tolerance of profanity, tolerance of pornography, an anything goes attitude towards intimate relationships, and freedom of political speech. That was true at the start of the Russian Revolution. One of the things they did was to legalize and encourage rampant promiscuity at the outset of the Russian Revolution. Meanwhile, they were shutting down churches and synagogues. They were killing people from the political opposition. Over and over again, history has shown us that licentiousness does not equal political freedom. I strongly recommend to my listeners that they go on YouTube, go online, and read up about the Spanish Civil War. On the one side, you had royalists and religious traditionalists. On the other side, you had people who believed in a republic form of government similar to the United States, and then you had socialists and anarchists as well. You also had ethnic tensions. There were the Spanish-speaking regions, the Basque-speaking regions, Catalan-speaking regions, and the Gallego-speaking regions. And each of these groups wanted to be recognized and accommodated. Some wanted their own country. And all of these disagreements came to a bloody climax from 1936 to 1939, and the country was years in repairing the damage of that. Perhaps if we taught about the Spanish Civil War, the Greek Civil War, and the breakup of Yugoslavia in the United States, it could prove a helpful springboard for discussion about the importance of a sense of a shared identity, of civility in business and personal relationships. I don't think having conservatives and liberals, Democrats and Republicans pointing fingers at each other will get very far. I think we will get further in discussing the future of our country if we compare it to other nations in Europe, Africa, and beyond. It has been enjoyable yet again speaking with you, and hope to join you next week. Thank you. This wraps up another weekly episode of Between the Presets. I thank you all for the pleasure of sharing with me my weekly muse. Whatever platform you access, hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a comment is much appreciated. My email address is thewinterriders@gmail.com. thewinterriders@gmail.com. Until next week, adio, which in some African languages means born on Monday or be righteous, and closely resembles adios in Spanish.